Welcome to the Catholic Midlife Podcast, where we're addressing the challenges and the opportunities of midlife from a uniquely Catholic perspective. Join us each week as we spark a midlife renewal and create a firm foundation for the next wonderful, exciting, awesome season of life. Welcome to the Catholic Midlife with Karen and Curtis Herbert.
Hi.
We're glad you're joining us for this session of our podcast. We are in season 1, Managing Midlife Transitions with Grit and Grace. If you were with us last time, we talked about endings and the role of endings in the transition process. This week, we're talking about, drumroll please, the neutral zone, the messy middle.
I call it the neutral zone. Karen calls it the messy middle.
It's true. It's true. I call it the messy middle because I have this image in my mind. Oh, it's so bad. It's this like torn up kitchen in the middle of a remodel. It's like that stage where everything's been pulled out and there's dust everywhere and nothing works. You can't use your sink and you can't use your stove. And the new thing has not yet appeared to wow you. And it's just the thought of that is so intimidating that I know I will never, ever, ever remodel my kitchen.
You know, that kind of works for me.
Good. I hope that's okay with you because I just do not think I can handle it.
Before we move out, but
okay.
Yeah, so it's chaotic. The neutral zone is chaotic. Frankly, I think of my teenagers' bedrooms at a certain stage. And then like just having to like find my center and my zen and not react out of all that.
Right.
But whatever you want to call it, it's uncomfortable.
It's very uncomfortable. Yes. So why do we hate it so much? What is so hard about it? It's uncomfortable. It's like something has ended. So there's this hole and you're not sure how you're going to fill it.
Yeah, it's the uncertainty that really kills me. I just hate that. I want a plan. I want a direction. You know, even if it's a big challenge, that's okay. As long as I pretty much know what needs to be done, then I can go get it, go after it. But just to sit there in uncertainty is really tough.
You know, that's really true about you, hon. I can affirm that. You like a plan. You like action, taking steps, making progress. It's kind of a killer when you're just in the middle of it and you're not sure what steps to take or what action to take. I feel like in the neutral zone, there's a lot of anxiety because there's all this insecurity about what's coming next and it's unknown. And I think we just hate that as human beings. We hate that insecure feeling of not knowing what's coming next.
Yeah. I mean, that's what triggers anxiety, right? Is fear and uncertainty. And so you're getting all this uncertainty and then, well, that's the perfect time. That's the perfect time for all that old stuff to start to show up, you know, like Hamlet's ghost or whatever. Like, ooh, you should have done this.
Oh, it's
you shouldn't have done that.
If only I had ...
You know, really, that was such a big mistake. And I could be this or that or doing this now.
I think that's a really interesting point that it's kind of like in that no man's land, you start reflecting on the past and kind of in a negative way often. It's like this storm that's ready for negativity to show up. You know, we start in the midst of the unknown. I think we imagine the worst. We think about the worst happening.
Yeah, so it's so natural to give in to the negative.
Mm-hmm.
That's our negativity bias. And it's unfortunate because in those transitional times, it is a good time to revisit what's been happening in your past and just to sort of sneak preview into some of the midlife per se issues, that all those, you can have some pretty unrealistic expectations holding over from your younger days. And it can be good to re-examine those. But like you say, you get the lens of negativity going, and yeah, it's Hamlet's ghost.
Right. So it has to happen in a pretty intentionally positive way.
By the way, I know that Hamlet wasn't the ghost, but it's in Hamlet, and there's that ghost there. I just want to be clear.
Well, you notice I didn't correct you because I have no recall of that
okay.
particular Shakespearean play. Well, it makes sense like that we would have this knee-jerk reaction to just avoid all of this uncertainty and the insecurity.
Yeah, well, that's the Western way, right? Mm-hmm. Especially in America, we're very pragmatic. Yeah. We're gonna do the thing. We're gonna get through it. We're not gonna whine about it. We're not gonna complain about it. And hey, we're adults. We're gonna figure it out. We're gonna march forward, rock and roll. So yeah, it's contrary to all that ethos.
It is. And actually, this makes sense because this is the question that people ask often, which is like, how long is this going to take? How long do I have to sit here really before I get into the new thing? And really the answer is, well, it depends, right? It depends on your transition, on how big of a transition it is, how it's affecting you, and the place it's taking in your life. But recently I was reading some research that if it's a big transition, if it's one of those, 3 or 4 life quakes that happen in your life, it takes a long time. It takes 3 to 5 years to move through the transition process into the new beginning. And I think a lot of us, we don't want to be in that for that long. And it's surprising, and we just want to get through it. Let's move on. Let's get to the next thing.
And let's be perfectly clear. We're not saying it's going to take 3 to 5 years to get over it. Mm-hmm. There are things in life that you will never get over, but you will transition. You'll transition to something new, and you'll find the purpose in whatever it was, even if it's something that you wish never would have happened. We're not saying that all things are necessarily quote unquote good, but we are saying that you will find purpose in all things.
Yes. And a great example of this is something I was just listening to in Brene Brown's new book, Atlas of the Heart. She was talking about grief and some research around grief, that at the end of the transition process, it's not like you don't have the grief, but the grief has found a place in your life. It's settled into a place, and it's part of you, because especially in very tragic situations where a person has so much grief, it's part of you. It changes you. You take it into yourself, and it finds a place. And getting through the transition doesn't mean you stop grieving.
Yeah. So that's an example of a life quake.
Exactly. So one thing about the messy middle, as I like to call it, it's really uncomfortable, but there are all these significant, important things that are happening. There are meaningful things happening. And sometimes we don't realize it, or we don't have the vision or clarity to know exactly what's going on. And that's part of the unknown. Like, what's really going on here, and why is it important?
Yeah, so this is good. So sometimes you don't realize you're in the transition, or sometimes you're in the transition and you get stuck. And it just reminds me of this lady I was talking to, and she found out what we do. And she said, oh, I wish my mom would be your client, because every time, she retired 10 years ago, and every time I go see her, she says, I should be doing something more productive. I'm not doing anything with my life. And that was very interesting to me. And of course, we don't know what's going on with her mom, but there's a number of possibilities, right?
Right. And it sounds almost like she's stuck in the neutral zone. And maybe she actually has some new things in her life that she's investing in. And she's just telling herself, well, these don't count.
Yeah, so maybe it's just she has some scruples, like she's convinced that paid work or raising the kids, that's work. Mm-hmm. And if you're not being quote unquote productive like that, then somehow you're slacking off. So it could be an outlook sort of thing like that.
Right. It would take some reflection and awareness to figure out what she really wants. But that does strike me as an example of not having moved through the transition and having clarity on what her purpose is and her vision for that.
Right. There's a lack of clarity as to purpose, because another possibility, right, is that she knows she's not living up to her values.
Right.
And she's not creating purpose that holds her high values. And she's in fact not having the courage that she needs to live a life that's consistent with her most important values and principles.
Right. Right. Actually, she would be a great client for us because that's exactly what we help people with. Exactly. So actually, I'm also thinking of this client that I had a number of years ago on this point. And she was in a corporate job and she had this new venture that she was creating, a new business with some colleagues. And they were starting to get going on it. So her vision was to leave her job and go with this new business. And it was just, she's in the midst of all this uncertainty and insecurity. Well, I'll have to stay at my job right now, but I really want to do this thing. And there was this frustration about being in this neutral place. I'm not really here, but I'm not really there. And an interesting thing that happened in the coaching was she started to realize that actually some really important things were happening right where she was. That there were some initiatives in her current job that would really be helpful for her experience in this next thing that was happening. And that there were some things to work out with her colleagues that working them out now was super helpful before they, all left their jobs and moved into this new venture. And when she could refocus, she could see what those important things were that were going on for her.
Well, so this is interesting. So was this a situation where she wasn't getting the thing done and she was frustrated with herself, but then she realized she was having this unconscious resistance to doing the thing because she somehow realized that what was happening at her primary job was really important to her future success?
I think she was just a really driven person.
Yeah.
So she was going to be frustrated with not taking the action, doing the thing, getting it started right now. And the fact was it was probably better that she gave herself, the next year to dig into some of these important things that were happening. So she would be prepared for the next thing. And I think we realize this unconsciously as Christians a lot. I hear a lot of people say, wow, this thing happened in my life, this new thing, and I realized I was getting prepared for it. God was preparing me to enter into this thing, whether it's a trial or something that brings joy. So there's like this reflective understanding of being prepared for something new.
Yeah. So if you can recognize, hey, okay, this is a transition, then one of the keys is to look for the growth and try to facilitate it, even if you don't really see where it's going.
Yes. Look for it. Exactly. And lean into it when you see it. Engage with it when you see it.
Yeah. So, when you see it, right? So transition, this is a real thing, whether people call it the transition process or not. And, I just want to assure our listeners that, people go through these stages, and our culture, we have a very stoic front, right? But people are struggling with these things, whether they use these terminologies or not. And just just relax a little bit and know that other people struggle with transitional matters, that it takes time. And you're getting bogged down because that's kind of what the transition zone is like. It's you're wading through the bog, trying to find your way. And we want to get through it, but we want to get through it and come out to a good place on the other side.
Right. Exactly. And part of what I'm hearing you say, Curtis, is there's a certain kind of awareness we want to develop around what we're experiencing, how we're experiencing it, and the possibilities of what we can get out of it. And I think a lot of times we have an awareness, oh yeah, there's some change in my life. I'm experiencing a transition. I'm looking for a new job. I'm going to move to whatever new place. But there may not be an awareness of what we can do in the midst of that process to really support ourselves for success and to step into something new that could be waiting for us.
Yeah, I think we can have an assumption that there's so much momentum in our life. There's so many expectations. There's that we can have ideas that, well, to play my role, I have to behave in a certain way. And the idea that there might be something that's really new for us can be strange.
Yes. Yeah. I think a lot of times we do move through life and we're not seeking the something new. It's almost like a trap of the neutral zone is we're getting through it, but we're not looking for the new and the growth edge and the opportunities that could be there for us. I'm thinking of, like let's say you retire and you start traveling. Well, that could be something new for you. It could really have a lot of meaning and beauty for you to move into a phase of life to do that. Or
absolutely. I mean, it could have a lot of transformational value, spiritual value, relational value. It could be a great new activity.
It could. Or it could be just the next thing I do because that's what you do. And it could be just the thing that's rooted in all my old ways of being and all my old patterns. And in that sense, it has the potential to not be something new.
Yeah. So it's an activity, but it's just the momentum from your past life.
Right.
So maybe the momentum in your relationship. And it's like the expected thing and it's fun, but is it really, where's God's plan and all that?
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to see with God's eyes,
right,
what's possible for you?
So a new activity may or may not actually be something new in your life.
Yeah. So another thing, so I just want to be clear. So with the travel, you just never know, right? And we don't want to ever judge people because they could have huge things going on in your life, and you ask them what they're doing, and they're like, "Oh, I'm going to go travel," which is great. But the reality is, they've got enormous things happening in their life, and that's just the conversation, right?
Exactly. So when I think about people who are in the neutral zone, there's just some attitudes or approaches that are super helpful. Super helpful. Part of it is what we just said, right? Attending to new things. And I like what you said, I think the other day to me, Curtis, about looking for golden threads.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, I'm not sure how to put that.
Yeah. So you're in the neutral zone and you're trying to figure out what's happening. Hopefully you're experimenting a little bit. You have a sense of what's important. And without diving in, you're trying some new things in your life. And as you go along, you can start to sense that, okay, this thing is important. It's like there's all these threads in your life. There's these activities, possibilities, thoughts, beliefs, whatever it is. And you start to sense some of them are the golden threads that are really leading into your future, that are leading to that new place that's there for you. And you start to gather them together and it's the golden threads, and you start to let them pull you forward gently.
Right, right. So it's almost like we have to sit in this place of insecurity and uncertainty long enough with enough awareness and acceptance, like giving ourselves permission to be in this place long enough to allow those golden threads to kind of float to the surface and have the ability to see them for what they are. Because I think, I've experienced certainly that I'm going through life, and at one point there's this opportunity or possibility, and I'm just like, nah, not important, or not going to do that, or not interested. And then another point in life, that same possibility or opportunity comes back around, but this time I have a different perspective on it. I'm in a different place. And so I relate to that in a different way. And it does become really important. But the timing had to be right. And I had to go through some transformation to be ready for that.
Yeah. So it can seem unexpected when God and Providence just presents you with the right opportunity, and you're like, wow, this is amazing. And you step into it. The thing is that there are often many opportunities for us, but we haven't had the internal changes that let us recognize those as opportunities. In fact, they're not opportunities for us until we're ready.
Right.
Until we're ready, right?
Right. Exactly. So one of the virtues that I think is so important to cultivate in this place is the virtue of hope. And Joseph Pieper, he's a Catholic philosopher, talks about hope. And he stresses that we stand in this place of uncertainty. And actually, this is really interesting because he says we're always in this place of existential uncertainty. So in a way, feeling this way in a transition is reflective of an underlying truth of who we are as humans. We are pilgrims on the way, and we have not arrived. And that is a place of insecurity and uncertainty. And many times, Pieper says, we will do whatever we can to avoid insecurity. We'll create security in some form that is not true security, or we'll shrink back from stepping into that place because we're fearful of what it means to live there. But hope stands in uncertainty and insecurity and looks forward to the promises of God and places hope in the promises of God. So I think in many ways, learning to be in transition well in the neutral zone is a way of practicing the virtue of hope.
Insecurity is a big deal. And to hear Pieper explain that it's part of the human condition, that it's central to the human condition, I have a few thoughts about that. One is that I need to be comfortable with the insecurity. And that's really, really hard because control and minimizing risk and all these sorts of things are very important. So, and I think we have a certain culture that doesn't like insecurity and will go to great lengths to avoid it. And having a lack of, so avoiding insecurity means that we might start avoiding hope.
Right.
And we should pursue this theme later in other podcasts. There's a lot to be said here. And especially there's some links between the transition stages and some of the traps of hope.
There really is. And there's a link between some things that happen in midlife and the seeking of security. So I'm thinking of a number of people I've interacted with and coached, and it's like been really hard for them to move into the next thing because there's this burden of, well, I have to feel secure before I do that. I have to have, this certain financial security, or I have to have this relational security, or my kids have to be settled and then I can get settled, or, I have to be at this certain place before I can move forward with this dream. So I think security is also kind of a big theme in midlife and would be interesting to come back around to it. So we want to encourage our listeners to challenge yourself when you're in the midst of insecurity and uncertainty, not to try to just get out of it, not to avoid it, but sit in it long enough to see where the transformation and growth needs to happen so that you will be prepared for the new things in your life. We would love to have some more conversation with you, our listeners, on these topics. If you're interested in joining us, come on over to Facebook and join the Catholic Midlife Podcast group. We'd love to have some ongoing conversations and hear what you think about what it is we talk about. Thank you for being with us, and we will see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to the Catholic Midlife Podcast. It's great to be here with you. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite app or platform. Leave a review that's so helpful so that others like you can find the podcast. And be sure to tell your friends. We'll see you next week.